Asta was horrified. He was horrified as the warm red liquid dripped down his chin, his right eye red and black instead of the usual green. The drunkard was screaming in pain. The taste in his mouth was exquisite. He turned to Yuno, his friend, Yuno, who was like a brother to him. The look on Yuno's face was pure shock. With such an incredible taste in his mouth, you would wonder why he was so horrified. He was horrified because it was so incredible. He was horrified because the taste of human flesh was so incredibly delicious. The drunkard stood up, holding his arm that had a chunk torn out of it. You freak! I'll kill you! He charged towards Asta. He backed up in fear, not knowing what to do. He held his arm up to block, and the drunkard stopped charging. Asta looked up. Asta looked as the man was impaled by a large red tendril that was coming out of his back. Ah! Hello everyone, I'm Transbeauty, and welcome to part 1 of What If Asta Was Half Ghoul, Half Spider Person, henceforth referred to as What If Asta Was the Son of Peter Parker and a Ghoul. Yes, I have an updated version of the thumbnail, but I'm not putting it on this video because, recognizability. If you haven't seen part 0, go ahead and watch it. 10 likes for part 2. I hope you enjoy. Asta was never normal. Normal kids can't climb up and down walls. Normal kids can't smell you from half a kilometer away. Normal kids can't shoot webs from their wrists. Normal kids can't lift a large wheelbarrow above their heads with little to no effort. Normal kids can't turn their eye red and black when they're scared or angry. But this was new. No one knew what to say. Not even Asta himself. They all knew that he didn't know what he was doing. They all knew that it was as if a demon had taken control of his body. But no one knew what to do. Yuna was quivering in fear, and Asta was sitting in the corner in the fetal position, too shocked to even think. Asta looked at his spider mask. It was the one thing he had from his parents. He reached out and grabbed it. He put it to his face. It felt safe. He put it on. The mask was safe. The mask would make sure that he couldn't hurt anyone. Eventually, Sister Lily approached him. Asta, are you okay? Asta was silent for a moment. I killed someone. I tasted their flesh and then I killed them. It tasted so good. Why did it taste so good? It shouldn't have tasted so good. Am I a monster? Asta, no. You aren't a monster. A monster wouldn't regret what they did. I scared Yuno. Does he think that way? Sister Lily was silent. I don't know. Asta thought back when he and Yuno were told the tale of the first Wizard King. How Sister Lily explained the classism that plagued the continent, or at least the Clover Kingdom. Stupid, Asta said. What? It's stupid that they think they can look down on others just because they're noble. Well, yes, but it's not like it can be changed that easily. Asta stood still for a moment. All right, I've decided. Decided what? I'm going to become the Wizard King. What? You heard me. But, Asta, you said it yourself, you don't have any mana. You could tell by the way you smelled, Yuno pointed out. So, I'm strong, and I'm clever. I'm gonna train bunches and bunches and get even stronger. Asta missed that memory. He didn't eat for a few meals. He just wasn't hungry. One day, Yuno told him to meet in the forest. What is it? Yuno clenched his fist. It was so scary. I couldn't do anything. Asta began to feel a little guilty. So, I'll never be scared again. What? And I won't cry again either. Asta, do you still want to be the Wizard King? Asta brought up all his bravery. Of course I do. Well, you won't. Because I'll be the Wizard King. Asta actually smiled for the first time since that day. They fist bumped and Asta noticed something. A slightly invigorating feeling and the scent of mana coming from his own body. He didn't tell anyone. Instead, he waited until he was alone at night. Then, he tried to use it. He managed to create a small, glowing red, liquidy ball. Then, the mana he had was all used up, and the ball disappeared. He was able to figure it out. That mana came from the drunkard. The only way he could get mana was by eating people. He trained his body, like he said he would. His training was obviously much harsher than canon, which is saying something. He would train using huge boulders. Asta rarely removed his mask. He only did it for mealtimes, and even then he would eat alone. Eventually, it came time for the grimoire ceremony. Asta didn't think he would get a grimoire. In all honesty, he didn't want one. Having one would likely mean he would need to eat human flesh. He entered the grimoire tower alongside Yuno. Are you nervous? Yuno asked. A little. The large number of people whispered excitedly, anxiously awaiting their grimoires. The old mage who watched the grimoire tower stood on the podium. Hello, everyone! Welcome to this year's grimoire ceremony. We've never had a Wizard King from this area, so I hope one of you can claim that feat. No! Seriously! Anyway, I am pleased to present you with your grimoires. Many of the grimoires started glowing and floating to their chosen young mage. Suddenly, a bright light came from where Yuno was. A 4-leaf clover was on the cover. People were astonished as they whispered. The glowing ceased as the grimoire fell into Yuno's hand. He turned and declared, I'm going to become the Wizard King. People erupted in amazement. Asta felt relief as he didn't receive a grimoire. He was about to give a counter-declaration to Yuno when a loud bang was heard from the walls of the tower. The sound was heard again and again. The wall burst open and a dark presence was felt emanating around what burst out of the wall as it moved towards Asta. What is that? A grimoire presented itself to Asta. The present stopped, and the grimoire fell into Asta's hands. It was hard to make out, but on the cover was a 5-leaf clover. Asta held it in his hands in horror. If it was a normal grimoire, at least there was some hope, but this grimoire had a 5-leaf clover on it. The sign of a devil. He quickly left the grimoire tower. He ran into the forest. He stared at his grimoire. It was black and looked as if it was covered in filth. "Asta!" Sister Lily called out. "Asta!" She was calling out to him until she found him. "Asta?" "Sister Lily, please. I need some time to think." She paused for a moment. "The Father has something for you." "If it's a celebration, I don't want it." "He says it might be from your parents." Asta looked up. Perhaps this was what he needed. He was at the lowest low. If he could have just one more thing from his parents, then maybe it wouldn't be as bad. He followed Sister Lily back to the church, and she brought him to the Father. "Father, you said you have something from my parents?" Yes. When you and Yuna were left outside the church, next to you was a chest with this note attached. The note told me your name and to give you the chest when you received your grimoire. Honestly, I would have given it to you after the ceremony, whether you received a grimoire or not. The Father gave a small chest to Asta. Asta took it. "Thank you, Father." He went to his room and opened the chest away from prying eyes. Inside was a note and an odd object that looked broken. He picked up the note. "Asta, I'm sorry I left you here, but it wasn't safe for you with me. There were people who were after us because of what I am. I don't know what happened to your father right now. You probably at least figured this out somewhat, but you aren't human." Asta paused, dreading what came next. At least, not entirely. You don't even really belong to this world. There are multiple universes. Your father had a way of traveling between universes, but it was broken. That's what the device in this box is. He ended up in my universe and accidentally dragged me to this universe. Asta paused. This was weird. Other worlds. He continued. Our universes don't have magic, so you don't. Not naturally, anyway. Your father was a human for the first while of his life, but then he gained the abilities of a spider. Asta looked at his hand. This explains some, but not everything. He continued. But what I am is called a ghoul. Ghouls look like humans, but we have to eat human flesh to survive. Asta started panting. We also have enhanced senses. I was overjoyed when we realized you could eat human food. But if you have eaten human flesh, something may have happened. Every ghoul has, or half-ghoul in your case, has something called a kagune. They are essentially a liquid muscle powered by human flesh that is stored inside your body until you need it. The shape differs depending on the ghoul, but for you, it should be 4 tendrils. Asta thought back to that night, to the traumatizing night. The tendril that killed the man was called a kagune? You should also get some mana when you eat someone. Your father's uncle told him that with great power comes great responsibility. That's why your father took care of me. We ended up falling in love, and you were the result. But we were discovered. There's one thing I want to tell you, if nothing else. Don't think of yourself as a monster, because at the very least, you're less of a monster than I am. From your loving mother. Asta finished the note. He looked at it in his hands. A ghoul? That's what I am? He didn't know how to feel. He thought that he would feel comfort, but he only felt like more of a monster, knowing what he was. Did she have a 5-leaf too? He started going back into the forest. On his way, he heard something. Chains? He sniffed the air. Yuno's scent was coming from the same direction as the sound. He started running as fast as he could. He saw the chain mage holding Yuno's grimoire with Yuno chained against the wall. Hey! The chain mage and Yuno turned to Asta. That belongs to Yuno! How pesky! The chain mage sent several chains towards Asta and tied him up. During the process, he felt an odd tingle. He broke out of them nearly instantly. What? He charged towards the chain mage, who created a ball of chains in defense. Asta broke through the ball with one eye red and black, not realizing his mask was knocked off. He lurched forward with his teeth ready to bite, only for him to taste a metal chain which was crunched through easily. The chain mage knocked him away. Asta realized what just happened. If he didn't get that chain in the way in time, it would have happened again. It was then when he realized after he swallowed the piece of the chain he bit off, and he felt that invigorating feeling. Yuno noticed it too. Asta had mana. His grimoire opened, and he saw he had 4 spells, but one of them was as if it was locked. He thought, okay, let's try the first one before these new ones. The pages flipped and a large sword came out of the grimoire. He grabbed the hilt and felt his mana almost move into the grimoire. What? What are you? He pulled the sword out of the grimoire. The mage sent a chain towards Asta. He felt the tingle again. He swiped the chain with the sword and the whole thing disappeared. He looked at the spell that was locked mere moments ago. Another chain went towards him. Ghoul's mana feast! He chomped on the chain and the whole thing dispersed into mana, which flowed into Asta's grimoire. He put the sword away and the mana flowed back into his body. The chain mage screamed and sent numerous chains towards Asta, who dodged them the best he could with the help from the tingling. But it started to overwhelm him. He felt something hit his back and the sound of shattering. He turned around and saw a bladed chain with the actual blade broken. The chain mage started panicking more. Asta shot a web and pulled his mask back to him. He put the mask back on. The chain mage started to back up. Asta shot a web, sticking his hand to the wall. He opened his grimoire. Web reinforcement magic! Rapid fire! His wrists started to glow white where his webs come out. He held his hands in the sign to shoot his webs, and dozens of webs shot out of his wrists, sticking the chain mage to the wall. The chain mage screamed, "What are you?" Asta drew his sword. A monster. Asta replied a little solemnly. He used his sword to bash the chain mage's belly. He took Yuno's grimoire back from him and walked up to Yuno and moved his mask to the side. Ghoul's mana feast. He bit into the chains, destroying them and causing all the mana to flow into his grimoire. He put the sword back into the grimoire, and the mana started to flow into him. Asta, that was amazing. Asta gave a small smile. Really? Yes, you can destroy magic, and you were able to defeat him mostly without using magic, but how did you break the chain that hit your back? I don't know. Either way, it looks like you'll be a worthy rival. Asta's small smile grew a little. Yeah. The two walked towards the exit of the alley as Asta moved his mask back to the front of his face. Do you remember our promise? Of course I do. They looked at each other. They fist bumped as they said, "Let's see who can become the Wizard King." Thus began 6 months of training. Asta trained harder than ever before. He pointed his hand at a tree. Blood creation magic. Piercing blood needles. Thin, red glowing, what looked like needles appeared by Asta and started rapidly shooting into the tree. It was his last new spell. He still had plenty of mana left, but he was using it conservatively. He drew the Demon Slayer sword from his grimoire. He started swinging at a boulder in a very amateur way. The boulder started to crack. Who am I kidding? It's doing something, but I have no idea how to actually use a sword. He heard something and turned to see a naked man running from a boar. Out of the way, boy! Look out! Asta was very confused, but he flung his sword, blowing the boar's head off. He lost balance and fell over. Whoa, you took that thing's head off. I'm Fanzel. I'm on a journey. I'm Asta Parker from Hodge Village. Nice to meet you. Franzel looked at Asta's sword. You aren't actually trained, are you? Was it that obvious? Asta treated Franzel to some food. Man, thanks. I haven't eaten in 2 days. He made the typical complaint about the pot potatoes. Why are you naked? I didn't want to get my clothes wet while I was fishing. Hey, why don't you come over to my house? Your house? Well, really, I'm just staying there without permission. Franzel brought Asta to his house. Hey, what are you doing here? Well, I used to be an instructor for the armies of the Diamond Kingdom, but I left. That doesn't bother you, does it? Honestly, there are some things about me that bother myself. You being from the enemy kingdom is nothing. Things that bother yourself? Like what? I'd rather not talk about it, but something that doesn't bother me that kind of outclasses you is that both my parents are from another world entirely. Fanzel looked at him. You're kidding, right? No, I'm not. Hey, so you aren't that great with a sword, so I was thinking I could train you. Really? Sure, I don't see why not. And thus, Asta's training began. During this time, Fanzel eventually confided the rest of his story. Asta's training was incredibly successful, and he ended up being praised as Fanzel's most promising student. After a few days, Mariella arrived. Where's Domina? Actually, Miss Domina may have passed away. A look of shock came across Franzel's face. Zell, are you okay? Franzel took a step back. Mariella, why do you think she might be dead? Mariella pulled out a wand. It's Miss Domina's wand. It was on the ground where you said the assassins attacked. There was also a lot of blood. I see. Sorry, could you leave me alone for a while? Fanzel went inside to contemplate. Mariella walked in. Instructor, please listen to what I have to say. Do you remember the students you helped escape? How is everyone? You actually smiled for a moment. Well, you see, everyone else died. Huh? Mariella pulled out a nice sword and stabbed Fanzel. Assassins sent by the Diamond Kingdom killed them all. Assassins broke through the windows. Mariella explained what happened, and how she was told to bring him back alive. Fanzel wasn't fighting back. Suddenly, the door was launched off its hinges, taking out one of the mages. What the hell, Mariella? I thought you were grateful to him! Of course I am. It's true I was able to survive because of the fighting techniques he taught me, so I still respect him greatly. Asta's Kakugan appeared, as he was full of rage. Mariella pointed her sword towards him as a signal to attack. Asta's grimoire flipped through the pages. Blood creation magic. Blood arm blades. A solid red material formed around Asta's forearms, shaping into sharp blades. A spell Asta had developed while training under Funzel. Asta, go. I told you to use what I taught you for your dream. Besides, I've lost the will to live. Just leave me alone. I'm tired of all this. Don't you dare say things like that! In a single second, Asta charged forward and cut down the assassins, leaving only Mariella standing. Even if your students are dead, what would they think if they found out you lost the will to live? It doesn't matter. Yes, it does! It matters more than you could possibly imagine! How could it possibly matter? Because every life matters! Someone who dies can never come back! They're gone forever no matter what you do! Every life is precious! Every life can hope, can have dreams! The dead can't dream! Even if you want to die now, what about tomorrow? And the day after that? Asta began to cry. At the very least, I can't let you die. Funzel was taken aback. Please, don't say you want to die. Funzel began to slowly stand up. Asta felt a tingling. He looked up and more assassins burst through the roof. Asta got in a fighting stance and when wind whipped around the room. Wind creation magic. Emperor of slashing winds. Winter wind. The blade of Funzel's wind sword shot at the dropping assassins and blew the roof off the house. Sorry about that pathetic display. I'm all right now. Don't let your guard down. Asta felt the tingling. In an instant, he pulled out his sword and slashed the icicle aimed at him, destroying it. You don't need to worry about me. The assassin started to stand back up. They're still fighting? Let us retreat, Mariella said. Both of them are far too strong for us. Gather the injured. You're leaving? To make a surprise attack, you must have 3 times the enemy's strength. If you lose half your men, change strategy. If you lose half of that, then you retreat. That's what a certain someone taught me. This isn't the end. I'll hunt you down for the rest of your life. Bring it on. I'm done running. From all of you, as well as myself. I'm going to try to treasure my own life. Mariella left. The next day, Funzel also left. Some time later, the 6 months of training finally came to an end. Asta eyed the bird that was watching him. It quickly flew off. Asta laid down and looked at his grimoire. Why did it come to him? He had no mana at the time. Did it have something to do with him being half ghoul? He got back up. No use thinking about it too hard. Asta resumed training. Not an hour later, Asta was running back to the church at high speeds with his sword in his hands. Yuno heard Asta running and saw how fast he was going. Yuno followed, now using his magic to boost his speed, but he was still falling behind Asta. They passed the gate. Go! Who's faster? Asta was definitely faster. Even with your crazy wind magic, I'm still faster than you. They entered the church and enjoyed the feast that was prepared for them. But Asta, even after all these years, still ate in another room. The next day, Asta and Yuno left for the capital. Eventually, they arrived. Asta's senses were overwhelmed. There were so many smells and sounds. Are you all right? Yuno asked Asta, who was covering his ears. Yup, totally. A smell entered Asta's nose. Fine. Asta started walking away from Yuno. That smell, it brought forth something in Asta. A tune entered his head. Asta couldn't help but be drawn to the familiar scent. Asta? Yuno began to follow. Where are you going? It didn't take long for Asta to start running. He kept running and running when he lost the scent. Yuno caught up with him. Asta, what were you doing? I don't know. I just smelled something. Come on, the exams are going to start soon. We have to enter. The two went to the Colosseum and eventually arrived at the kiosk. Like cannon, whispers spread around about Yuno's grimoire. Then, it was Asta's turn. Asta Parker, from Haj Village. Here's my grimoire. This is pretty filthy. Is it really a grimoire? Asta sighed. Yes, it is. After getting registered, Asta entered the Colosseum and was swarmed by the anti-magic birds. Eventually, he reached a breaking point and just webbed them to the ground. He walked away, no longer paying attention, and bumped into Captain Yami. Oh, sorry about that. Asta felt the tingling. Suddenly, Asta realized that the scent of the man was drenched in mana. An insane amount. I'll kill you. Yami froze. This kid has barely any mana, he thought. But his ki, it almost feels like I'm being hunted. Sorry, I'll be moving now. Finral showed up and started bringing Yami back to the stands. That kid. His ki is like nothing I've ever seen before. These are not Yami coughs, these are real coughs. These are... That emotional thing earlier didn't number on my throat. That kid. His ki is like nothing I've ever seen before. Is he even human? Yami finished his thoughts. Moments later, fireworks went off. Asta was approached by a man. Baha! You okay? Yeah, I mean, it was pretty scary, but I'm fine. Must have been rough having Captain Yami of the Black Bulls in your face like that. Must have been rough having Captain Yami of the Black Bulls in your face like that. I'm Seke. Seke Bronzatsa. Nice to meet you. Vaha! I'm Asta Parker. It's nice to meet you too. Sorry, I'm better now. The squad captains walked out and took their seats. As they arrived, Seke explained to Asta who they were. Thanks for the information, but... Is there a problem? Yeah. I can smell your ill intent when you're talking to me. What? Go off and try to trick someone else. Seke, freaked out, left without another word. William Vengeance began to speak. Candidates, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I will be conducting this exam. William opened his grimoire. Magic tree, descend! Roots began to come from the sky, granting each applicant a broom. We will now begin the Magic Knight's entrance exam. And that concludes part 1 of What If Asta Was the Son of Peter Parker and a Ghoul. I hope you enjoyed it. 10 likes for part 2. Please like and subscribe. Don't forget to pledge to my Patreon and help make me financially stable. At the $2 tier, you get behind-the-scenes looks and random happenings. Yeah, sorry about the coughing throughout the video. At the $4 tier, you get sneak peeks and the ability to vote in polls determining my what-if schedule. And the $6 tier, well, it was intended for early viewings of premiered videos, but since that flopped because I don't have the proper resources for doing that on Patreon, that's just nothing for now. For now. But I'd still really appreciate if you did the $6 tier. Now, to list my new patrons. No one! Please help. My top